You are listening to the Lone Star Community Radio on 104.5 KCZW LP Conroe and 106.1 KZCC LP Conroe and worldwide on irlonestar.com.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Extension Hour. I'm Amy Ressler, County Extension Agent, Family and Community Health. And today I've got Michael Potter with me. He is our County Extension Agent for Horticulture. Michael, we're so glad you could join us today.
Glad I could too. I guess I have a little bit more time on my hands now, especially on a Friday after a freeze. There's a lot less people calling about how to keep plants alive, rather now they want to know how to revive them, as far as, giving them CPR. So
so it's been a historical week last week, right? So I think it's interesting. We've gone through a lot of really historical things and just in the last few years. So, floods, pandemics, hurricanes, and now freezes. Yeah.
The polar vortex. They actually named the storms. I'm going to have to get used to that.
There was two names for the storms. Instead of, in like 10 years, we'll be saying, that storm back in 2011.
Exactly,
yeah. So, lots of calls this week, right?
Lots of calls this week. The whole thing is a lot of people, you can go back and you can look and see, kind of like we were talking about weather issues. Back in 1989, there was a big freeze. And I remember it vividly because my dad and we lived down in Corpus Christi area, and we actually walked out on the bay on ice, like 30 yards out into the bay on ice. It was that frozen. Fish were just so lethargic, you can pick them up and take them home. You didn't have to worry about catching them. You can just grab them and throw them in the cooler. So, these kind of events, they do occur and they do happen. It's just sometimes we don't really remember them or recognize that event because they happen so infrequent. The last, measurable snowfall we had that was any good was in 2004. And, I think we got 6 or 8 inches down in Corpus area. And up here, I know they got 8 to 10 or a little bit more than that. But the thing was, the next day it was gone. So this kind of storm has a little bit more lingering effects, and it has there's a lot of situational things that occur, especially with your plants. Depending on how much rainfall you got right before it froze, or rainfall that you got right when it froze. Because, for instance, if you get rain and it freezes over the leaves, that ice actually acts as an insulator. So if you were one of the ones that were fortunate enough to get that, which I had a little bit of that at my house, then your plants were a little bit more protected, especially if you covered them on top of that.
Right.
But if you didn't have that freezing rain and those leaves were exposed, you now have these big dark brown shrubs and trees and things like that you didn't typically have. So it's really interesting how, that many days of freezing weather, we're not used to it. You go to places like St. Louis or, these other places, and they're used to it. Brown's a color, and it's in the winter, and that's what they deal with.
Right.
And there's a few evergreens. So those plants are just far and few between. So.
And we've kind of jumped right into the conversation, but let's back up just a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about what you do as a horticulture agent for Extension and why you're even talking about plants and those kinds of things.
I remember years ago when I started into Extension, we had an Extension agent that has this picture of an octopus with all these arms, but it was an Extension agent. And you had to know all these different things and be able to pull from all these different realms. And so you have to know how water affects plants, how freezes affect plants, pathology, knowing what kind of diseases and viruses. And then you got to know the plants. So with my job, I've kind of got to grab from a lot of different areas. So I always say I can know enough to be dangerous with a lot of things.
It's kind of all of us.
That's an extension aid. We got all these. We're kind of like a Swiss Army knife, in a sense. We have all these tools and everything that we can use and pull from. And then when we don't know the answers, we go a step further and go to the ones that are really specific in their field in Extension, which is our research side of Extension. With me, I deal with basically what my counterpart, Brandon, the ag agent, he deals with everything outside the fences. I deal with everything inside the fences. So lawns, trees, shrubs, vegetable gardens, herbs, anything that's kind of smaller in scale, and also deal with some of the larger scale horticulture crops, maybe fruit and nut and things like that as well.
And do you also serve as the advisor for the Master Gardeners?
Yes. Yeah, that's a volunteer program through Texas A&M Agrilife Extension Service. We roughly have about 360 volunteers, and it used to be interesting because we would only have one Wednesday work day. Now we have 5 because we're trying to social distance and keep them out. And of course, they will come up there regardless because they love their plants. So yeah, I consult and do a lot of things with them as far as educational programs and that as well.
Right. And some of the shows we've had in the past, we've had several of our master gardeners come and visit about different types of things, you know, what to do for your fall vegetable garden and what to do with your spring vegetable garden. And then we've had the beekeepers and we've had the junior master gardeners. And I'm trying to think, we've just had a variety because they are just an awesome resource to have too, because they have a very broad knowledge base.
Right.
Individually, they know a lot of different things, but they also have their specializations that they work in.
Yeah,
as
we
well.
have a lot of subject matter experts in a sense. You know, today, in fact, I've just filmed 2 sections with one of our vegetable people out in the garden. We did kind of a short video on how to plant tomatoes. And then we did another one on how to plant strawberries. So they would say, hey, while you're here, let's do another one real quick. So right now I'm the film guy. So now I have to start editing and getting that put on to the website and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've got a lot of good subject matter experts in floral, you know, vegetable, turf, all that kind of stuff. So.
And while we're on that topic, let's. So where are those videos going to be?
They're going to be on
How can you find them?
Yeah, Montgomery County, our Montgomery County Facebook page. We're going to post them there. We're also going to post them on the Montgomery County Master Gardeners Facebook page and the Montgomery County Master Gardener website, which will be the mcmga.com. So we've got several ways we can post them and get them out there. So
Right. And then if someone was interested, they literally could call or email and you could send them just the link to that particular video as well.
Right. And we also have, the Master Gardeners, we put together a year's worth of classes. We basically do those once a month. Through that program, we were able to do the first one. We kind of got nipped because of COVID, so we had to go for a way, kind of slip back and go into a more online format. So a lot of the people that sign up through the MCMGA website to get to those classes, they'll actually be given the link so they can always go back and review or go back and preview those videos again. We had to cancel the one that was just recent because of the polar vortex sent us home. So, but we're going to actually, I've scheduled with the vegetable crew. I was going to do turf and they were going to do vegetables. We're going to record this next Tuesday, their portion of it, and then I'm going to record mine separately because I'm going to try to do some stuff actually outside with a phone and do some live video through Teams and then have it recorded and then actually post it so those people can still see that program. So.
Right. So, and I guess some people think it's a curse, but it can also be a blessing. Having, the pandemic has caused us to adapt the way we deliver our programs and our information. And so in some ways it can be challenging because we're learning new ways. I mean,
and it takes us some time to learn those new things, especially some of those older dogs, so to speak.
Right.
Learning new tricks can be a little bit more time consuming.
But at the same time, it is literally at your fingertips. So if someone needs to know about how to grow strawberries right now, they don't even have to wait until they can get a hold of a master gardener or you. They could watch the video and have the information that they need.
Yeah,
so.
and that's the good thing about having it archived in a sense is they can always go back and watch it, come up with questions, and then call, if they have additional questions and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, because sometimes I feel like on a lot of topics, I don't even know where to start asking questions. I'm just like, I don't know what to do with this dead plant, like after the freeze, and it's just laying there. And what am I going to do with it? How do I need to get rid of it? Do I need to do, or what do I need to do?
Period. Yeah. The good thing too, the kind of pro about we talked about just the availability of that program or that information. There's also so many sources now. The agents from all across the southeast region have a Gardening on the Gulf Coast program that we do actually do it every other Wednesday. I think we have one coming up, or I can't remember if we had one this week or not. It just depends.
All the weeks run together, right?
It all kind of comes together. And we're, but they have another one that they do about every other week, so you can actually find that, and it's through the YouTube YouTube channel, and we post those and. People can go back and review them. And also Facebook Live, Aggie Horticulture has a Facebook page. I did a program during the initial stages of COVID when everybody got sent home. We had to work from home. I did a live video in my yard about lawns and how to take care for it, which was kind of fun because I had to watch 2 kids complain in bicker at each other quietly behind the scenes. So it was kind of a fun adventure there. But it was real neat. You're working from home, but you're still kind of doing your job, and it's just kind of everyday life. But Aggie Horticulture is another way to do that through Facebook, and then of course the Aggie Horticulture website.
Yeah, and then of course this show, the Extension Hour.
Right.
We all of these shows are loaded on YouTube. They're on the station's website too, so people can go back and watch those to find out more information. Which we are going to get more into the topic for today. So we're going to talk about what the heck do I do with my freeze damaged landscape? So all of those sad looking plants that are in my front yard,
the trees, the perennials, the lawn. So we'll get into all that.
We'll talk about that a little bit more, but we're going to take a break and we'll come back and really get into the cool topic that we have for today. So you're listening to the Extension Hour here on Lone Star Radio 104.5, 106.1, and we'll be back right after this.
Our talk shows and music shows are looking for sponsors. Want to expand your brand awareness? Reach the hyper-local audience in Montgomery County? Lone Star Community Radio sponsorships accomplish this. Want to see our stats and rates? Check out irlonestar.com/sponsor for more information. Or call in and leave us a message at 936-647-3776 with your question. Get seen on TV or YouTube and heard on our podcast, FM, and internet radio. Sponsor your local radio station with Lone Star Community Radio.
Health Center Southeast Texas is a federally qualified health center. We accept Medicare, Medicaid, and most major private insurances. For our self-pay patients, we have a sliding scale discount program available. Our health centers have qualified providers and staff striving every day to provide the best quality of care to our patients. Services offered are family medicine, behavioral health services, telepsychiatry, and pediatrics. We have 4 area locations. Look up the Health Center Southeast Texas online at hcset.com.
The Texas A&M Agrilife Extension Service has been dedicated to educating Texans for over a century. In 1915, the Extension Program was established under the federal Smith-Lever Act to deliver university knowledge and agricultural research findings directly to the people. Ever since, Agrilife Extension programs have addressed the emerging issues of the day, serving diverse populations across the state. Texans turn to Extension for solutions in horticulture, agriculture, 4-H and youth, and family and consumer sciences. Extension agents respond not only with answers, but also with resources and services that result in significant returns on investment to boost the economy. Join us Fridays at 1 o'clock for the Agrilife Extension Hour.
Welcome back. We're here talking with Michael Potter, who is our horticulture agent with Texas A&M Agrilife Extension Service. And our Extension Hour, we talk about our people, our programs, our partnerships, and definitely, the county extension agents are the people. And then we have lots of additional people that help us, like the master gardeners. You mentioned 360 of them that volunteer to help us. They take care of the beautiful gardens all around. Of course, they are still assessing the damage of what happened as a result of this horrendous freeze that we had that doesn't happen around here very often.
Right.
So we're going to visit some more with Michael, talk a little bit about freeze damaged plants, landscapes, those kinds of things. But you kind of wanted to start out talking about trees and shrubs.
Yeah, trees and shrubs. The whole thing is the good thing about our trees is we have to remember that they don't just grow here. A lot of them, they grow further north, up as far as Nebraska, even. So a lot of those trees, even though they tend to be a little bit more evergreen here, they were nipped by the freeze. They, are going to suffer a little bit as far as they're just not used to it. They're not acclimatized. Like I always say, take a Canadian, bring him to Texas in the summer and see what he says.
Plants aren't that much different than people.
Exactly. Plants are kind of the same way.
Living.
But we're going to see those, the effects of that over a longer period of time. So like right now, there's some trees that, just they dropped everything or they're completely brown. That's okay. They basically got sent into a dormancy. So they're going to come back. We just have to give them time to do it. It kind of sets them back for the year. What we kind of need to watch out for is where they have a trunk or something that may be split. And the way that would happen is that, the tree would have a lot of moisture in its trunk. And because it was so cold for so long, and it basically froze the inside of that tree. And so the tree, as it thawed, would just split because of all the excess water and everything that was in there. So that would be the only kind of scenario where you would go, that tree might be dead.
Okay, so what I hear you saying is if something like that, I mean, it's going to be pretty obvious that happens. You're not going to go, is it dead, is it not? You're going to go, oh, something is wrong there.
Yeah,
okay.
and like you said, because we don't really have these kind of events very often, we need to look at it from a standpoint that we kind of do need to just kind of wait and see what happens. I mean, there's no way I can predict. I mean, plants is my job, but I'm not going to, predict that. Or I definitely don't want to predict weather. But, the fact is we could potentially have another freeze. We've had freezes as late as April 1st. So keep that in mind, bottle that up, and we'll talk about perennials here in a bit. And we'll talk about why I even mentioned that. We don't want people to actually touch any of those plants. Leave them alone. Don't start trimming on them now. Let's wait for 3 to 4 weeks, till we get past that freeze event.
And wait, let me stop you here for just a second. So, like we mentioned before in the first segment, this is something that you could go back and watch at another point. So, this is true. What you're just describing now, the potential damage and waiting for all of the freezes to kind of pass, is true whether it's a short freeze or this polar vortex.
Hopefully
like we just talked
don't
about.
get another named polar vortex.
Right.
I mean, that would be just really odd. I mean, look at 2020, here it goes. Anyway, but if we get another freeze, we may drop down into the 20s one night or something for, 5 or 6 hours or something like that. It just, if you cut everything off a plant, it just exposes that core of that plant to much more freeze damage. I always in fact, one of the staff members came in and said, can I explain it to me so I can help answer questions? I had a green pen and a brown pencil, and I said, here you go, green and brown. If I cut off the brown, the next thing I know, I'm going to replace the green with the brown because that's how much further back it's going to die. So we don't want that to happen. That excessive or that extra material that's actually brown right now is going to serve as an insulator for the actual material that's alive. So we want to keep that on there and keep it on, until we get past that.
So even though you may be looking at it going, that doesn't look very good.
Just kind of
deal with it.
Admire the brown and the ugly for now. Deal with the ugly, It's only a couple of more weeks, just think you could live in other places where they see it every year. Luckily we don't, but we just see it once in a while. And I know people get impatient. I've already gone out with my wife out in the front yard and she pointed and I went, no, not yet. We're not touching it, There's only we'll talk about this later, but some of the more tender type plants and hollow stem type plants, agapanthus and some of those like that, there's a different way to deal with them. Some of your more low growing plants that may be more tender. But as far as your trees, leave them alone. Let's see what they're gonna do. They may even take a little bit longer to bud out this year. A lot of the things that occur with plants have to do with soil temperatures, your trees and your shrubs. Okay, they know when the ground and when the air gets, it gets warm enough, it's time to bud out. So you'll start to see bud swelling and things of that nature. We had a red maple at the office. Every year it starts really early, starting to kind of bud out. And I always know that it's kind of damaged because there's a lot of root systems underneath the parking lot. There's a lot of root systems that are going places. So we always know that that's going to kind of be the case. But after this freeze, all that new growth is gone. So I'm kind of, that one right there, I'm kind of waiting to see what is going to happen. It may need to be removed. We don't know.
So the new growth is gone. So that may or may not have affected the integrity of the tree itself, right? So you're saying just wait and see.
Yeah, just wait and see. We've got, let's just kind of wait till the last week of March, to say, ooh, are we going to have a freeze? If we don't, then we're good. Then we can start trimming on things, which once you start trimming, that also tells a plant, hey, start regrowing. So it'll start, budding out and it'll start to shoot things in different directions. So that's kind of what we're hoping will happen. It's just kind of a wait and see attitude. All the researchers and everything are saying the same thing. Let's wait and see what happens because we've never really experienced something like this. So,
and that's true for any type of tree.
Right.
Correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
any type
and
of
then
tree.
Shrubs.
Shrubs.
Are we going to treat those differently?
Yeah, shrubs. And it's funny. You get into trees and shrubs, and you have large trees, medium-sized trees, small trees. Then you have large shrubs, which can be confused with small trees. So it's kind of a beret. But like wax myrtles, that's one of those kind of large shrubs, small tree type thing. They were damaged. I've got 2 very large ones that are 12 foot tall, 14 foot tall in my yard, and they were damaged. They've never been nipped by the cold like these have. But then I'd go drive down the street, and there would be somebody that had one that was great and one that didn't look good. And the same thing, it's just kind of a situational, especially in your lawn or your landscape. It may have been protected by the heat of the house, or even the way the wind whipped around the house or something. It just protected it. So you have shrubs that still are going to show some signs and symptoms of freeze damage. You're going to see, especially on your shrubs, evergreen type shrubs. I have some viburnums in my front yard. They are brown, but way up underneath where they were kind of protected or close to the house, I see some green still. So that's a good sign. And as we get closer into the end of March, there'll be some tests and things that we can do to kind of test that plant to say, are you still green? Let's scratch a little bit of the bark and let's see if it's still green underneath there. But let's wait to do that. Let's leave all that material on there, that dead material or decayed material, leave it on there, and let's protect it just in case we do have another light freeze or something.
All right. So as a homeowner, I'm just going to look and
enjoy
wait
the ugly.
And then getting near the end of March, then I start making some decisions about what will be cut away, what will be
have to be taken out completely.
So some things you're saying will just not survive, and that'll need to be absolutely removed.
Yes. Yeah. There's some plants that are just kind of, we have hardness zones throughout the whole nation, and they categorize them from a 5A or a 5B. So we're kind of a 8B, 9A type area, which has to deal with low temperatures. Well, of course, we exceeded those low temperatures. Not that it will change our situation as far as those zones, but it does affect the plants differently. So we've got to just, kind of maintain, look at it. And some of those plants are kind of sent into a dormancy stage. So they'll all of a sudden decide, it's time to grow. And then some, they may have been frozen too hard in the core of their stalks. Maybe they're not thick enough, or maybe they were exposed too much. Maybe they're on the north side of the house and they got too cold, and it will kill that stem completely. And of course, without any leaves and everything else, there's no way for that plant to create carbohydrates and sugars for itself. So that whole photosynthetic process doesn't work, and so then the roots die. And that's the other thing we have to think of too, is if you got rain and you have a permafrost layer, which, oh my God, people say permafrost in Texas. What is that?
Right.
It's where the actual top of the soil freezes. And if that's the case, there's going to be some of those plants that are going to be damaged. Their root systems are going to be damaged. And whether it be minimal, as in they'll lose a couple of branch tips here and there, because that's what feeds those branch tips, or whether it be maximum, meaning the whole plant will die. That's kind of what we're going to have to wait and see for a lot of those plants.
Okay. So I have to make a confession. So I'm not really good at this.
We all have our strengths and
I know. And I'm a good test subject for you, because I don't know this stuff. So in my front kind of flower bed area, there's this tree that's been growing, and I don't want it to grow there, because I don't want the roots to get up underneath the house. It's really close to the house, right? And so last spring, I'm hacking on that thing, and surely I'm going to kill it, and it's not going to grow back. Oh my gosh, the thing. Yeah, just like that's what it wanted to do. So, is this a good chance to, before it freezes again, if I go hack on it some more, can I maybe just let it go on its way?
Yes.
Okay.
I would hack on it all you want.
All right.
Damage it as much as you can.
But not the stuff that I want.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And there's some other things we can do for that. So.
All right. And then just so that I'm clear, so some of the things, though, once they do start decaying, you do need to remove those, because they can cause more problems, or is it something that you want to leave to go back to the earth?
So some of those plants that agapanthus and some of those hollow stem plants, amaryllis, and if anything, what we say is trim off the mushy. So if something is really mushy and water soaked,
Kind of slimy.
yeah, slimy, mushy stuff, trim all that off, get it away from there, because what'll happen is it sits there it'll send more bacteria and possibly fungus down into the plant, which will damage the plant even more. A lot of those plants will come back from their base or from their stems. I'm kind of waiting to see what happens to like philodendrons. Philodendrons can get really large. Well, as long as their bases were protected, or if they were at least shielded, they will come back from the base. And that's the same thing with a lot of these other little real tender type plants that are going to be mushy or slimy. Remove the slimy. In fact, Wednesday, we had a couple of the floral areas coming through, and they were getting rid of all the mush, cleaning everything up. And so my comment to them was, just be ready, because if we do get another freeze, they're going to need to cover them. They're going to need to put some mulch, all over the top and mound on top of them, or at least cover them some type of freeze cloth. That way it preserves the integrity of that stem or the root system, so it can come back. If you leave it exposed, it'll just freeze freeze completely, and then it'll die.
Because they're much more vulnerable now. So one of the things I love about talking about gardening and having the master gardeners here is, there's all these analogies to life, right? So, so these plants have been through a traumatic experience, and they're working on getting better. So you've taken off the mushy stuff, but that means that they still need time to heal before another traumatic experience happens. And if another traumatic experience is coming, we need to make sure that we have some extra protection for them, just like people.
Yeah, exactly. So just like, when things are most tender, okay? So I know there's people, I've watched people up and down my street. They've already trimmed. And I'm going, I'm laughing about it, because here it comes. All it takes is for them to cut, which signifies to the plant, okay, start to regrow.
It's time.
Yeah, it's time. I've been trimmed. I'm going to start to regrow now, because that's what you're telling me to do. And it's going to start to regrow, and it's going to have all this young, tender leaf material. And then we have another freeze, and it's more exposed now because of all that tender young leaf material. So that plant that you cut halfway back is now going to go even further back and possibly even lose it, because you've trimmed too much. You didn't allow it to kind of weather the storm, so to speak, and you've exposed all this young material to more freeze. So now it's going to die back further, or it's going to be damaged severely because you've cut it back too early. So the thing is, if you've done that, make sure you cover it up if we have another freeze.
Okay, so not all is lost.
Yeah.
If you go, I wish I would have heard that last week.
Right.
So if you did go ahead and trim, you
need to cover it.
Yes.
Yeah, need to cover it and protect it.
Watch that weather forecast for sure to see what's coming up, because like we said, there probably is going to be another freeze.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine. And even before this freeze came, I remember thinking, these are my plants are not looking very good. Like, they need to be trimmed. But I remembered what my horticulture agent, Michael Potter, said, wait till April 1st.
Wait till April 1st. And it's just the fact that it's not necessarily our last frost date. It's just that, just from experience and knowing that we can still have that April 1st freeze, let's just be careful. Yeah. Just be cautious of it. And typically when you get out to that, week and a half, 2 weeks out, the weather forecast will tell you, we're okay. Yeah. We're going to get a cold front, but it's only going to dip into the mid 40s or 50s. So then you're okay, but it's just in case. We've seen it too many times.
All right. So we've had a really good conversation about trees and shrubs, but that's not all the plants that are out there, right? There's a lot of other plants that people have questions about. So we're going to take a break. Okay. We're going to come back and we'll talk about other plants. And then in our last little segment, we'll also talk about what to expect, things to look for, planning for the future, because that's what we always want to do with plants and life, and my life analogies and that kind of thing. And then you give us like kind of a top 5, top 10 things to remember about freeze damaged landscapes. All right, so we're going to take a break. We'll be back right after this. This is the Extension Hour, our people, our programs, our partnerships, and our plants. There you go, one more P. All right, we'll be back.
Don't forget to download the Lone Star Community Radio app from your Google Play or Apple Store. Bring Montgomery County's community radio with you anywhere with your smartphone or tablet. If you are in the Conroe area, tune in on FM. That's Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1. If you are on the computer, bookmark irlonestar.com as your internet radio station. A Lone Star Community Radio. Broadcasting 24/7 from the heart of downtown Conroe, Texas. Lone Star Community Radio is looking for those who are interested in hosting their own talk show, with monthly and weekly slots available on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, and on irlonestar.com. Start your own podcast, create your first YouTube channel, and be on TV. Contact Lone Star Community Radio online at irlonestar.com or call the station message line at 936-647-3776 to take your first step into the radio world.
You're going to need me.
You're going to need us.
All of us.
You're going to need our help with your water, your air, your food.
You're going to need our determination, our compassion.
You're going to need the next generation of leaders to face the challenges the future will bring.
And we promise we'll be there when you need us.
Today, 4-H is growing the next generation of leaders.
Welcome back. This is the Extension Hour. We're talking about our people, our programs, our partners, and our plants. We've got Michael Potter with us. There's another P, Potter and plants, and we're talking about all those kinds of things. This Arctic storm that came through, but even everything that we're talking about is related to other types of freezes as well. So it's not just like these monumental kind of freezes that happen, but when a freeze does happen, which they do, even here in the further south part of Texas. They're going to happen. So we've been talking about trees and shrubs and what to do and that kind of thing. But so we were talking during the break about the difference between a fruit-producing tree and a non-fruit-producing tree. So there's some things that you wanted to mention on that.
Yeah, typically your landscape trees, your oaks, your maples and things like that you use for shade around your house is one thing.
But the ones that just grow that I want to get rid of.
Right. Well, those two. One man's weed, another man's treasure. So that's what we're looking at as far as what to do with trees. Let them just sit. Don't worry about them right now. A lot of those trees, because they're grown in different areas, like I said earlier, they might lose some more leaves, especially if they're evergreen. They're going to drop some leaves, but they're going to be fine. I don't see any kind of problem with any of those trees now, unless somebody tried to plant a brand new tree and just stuck it in the ground before it happened. Then there might be some kind of lasting effects for a landscape tree. But as far as the other trees, which are your fruit-producing type trees, peaches, pears, apples, any of those kind of fruit-producing trees, they're used to it. They don't have a problem with the cold. The only problem that we have with those trees is they bloom in order to produce fruit. Well, like at our office, we had a lot of trees that were already starting to bloom when this hit. And I'll go reverse back. I can't remember what year it was, but we had a Master Gardener plant sale, January plant sale, where we're selling fruit and nut trees. And it was cold, and we got rain, and we had ice. There was ice dripping down from the signs, big old icicles and stuff. And I walked over to one of our peach trees, and it had all the flowers encased in ice. And I was like, ooh, what's going to happen to that? Well, in that case, it protected the flowers. This fruit tree still produced well. In this case, where if there wasn't any water on those flowers and it didn't encase them, then those flowers are more than likely lost. Meaning that's going to be no fruit. A lot of the peaches will probably not produce hardly anything. It also may send them into a secondary bloom, because I've seen so many times where some of these fruit trees in the middle of the summer we'll have good rain and we'll have cooler temperatures, and all of a sudden they put out blooms, and we're like, no, you're confused. Stop. But we're not a very, I would say, consistent environment for fruit production. And we always say that if you expect to be a fruit producer, don't bank on it, because our weather is like a roller coaster ride. There's a lot of these trees require chill hours, and that's the temperature between 32 and 45 degrees. So they gather chill hours at that point. Anything below or anything above kind of has a negative effect on the tree. Or I should say anything above has a negative effect on the tree. Anything below, it just really doesn't have much of an effect. we've played around with all kind of models and stuff regarding chill hours, but we know that once those temperatures get in the 50s and 60s, like we do typically through a winter, that it can send trees into an early budding stage where they come out and you'll have flowers pop out before the leaves. And that is a signification that there's a mechanism in the plant that's messed up because of weather. So typically you should have flowers and leaves coming out at the same time. And as that flower completely opens, the leaves completely come out and expose. We just had flowers. So a lot of those fruit are going to be lost. Then that's something, if they haven't trimmed their trees, now would be a good time to do it. Just remember, peach trees are open center. That means you could basically take one of those big old yoga balls, which I take my coordinator for Master Gardeners. I always take her ball out there, her big old ball that she sits on, and I go put it in the middle of the tree. It should hold that ball in the middle of that tree. That's an open center, and that's to allow for air to pass through so you don't get virus or fungal issues. And then you also have like apples and pears, which are more of a scaffolding type tree. You still want air to flow through it, but you don't want branches crossing and stuff like that. So now's a good time to kind of trim up those trees and get them ready.
Okay, so let me just clarify, because we had just talked about, wait about 4 weeks before you start cutting on things. So
that would be the exception.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be one of the exceptional items. The mushy stuff was one. This is another one. Those fruit trees. If you hadn't. A lot of people don't, when they get a new fruit tree, they don't realize, like, especially with a stone fruit tree, that it requires an open center. So they go buy this nice 4 foot, 5 foot tall tree. And of course, what we do is we tell them, by the way, you need to cut it off at 48, 28 inches, so it'll start to branch out. A lot of people won't do that because they don't know, or they don't want to do it. We have good examples of that at Extension Office. In our demonstration, we have some that are growing wild. A lot of those don't do very well. In fact, much less production and overall health of the plant than what we have, because we have two areas. Traditional, this is how we take care of these trees. This is how not to take care of them. So we have a side-by-side comparison of those, and you can definitely see the differences. But a lot of people don't realize that you do have to trim them to have a good production. You also have to thin your fruit out, and that's a whole separate subject when the fruit actually do produce.
And then, from what I understand too, what I've learned from my friends is so the production of the fruit, whatever it is, may be different from year to year.
Yes.
So if it's a little less this year, you don't freak out. That doesn't mean that it's not going to ever produce. Or
and it's funny. I actually showed somebody a graphical kind of line graph formulation of what California looks like in the fruit producing regions, and versus what we did, and it was quite we're definitely a roller coaster ride compared to what California is. They have a very steady chill hour for most of their trees. And some people say, well, what's our chill hour? Well, it can be anywhere from 500 to 600 on average. It doesn't mean that we haven't seen 1,300, because I know we have, because I've got years of data, and we've been under that many times. And a lot of people say, well, why do you sell this tree at the Master Gardener plant sale? Well, we make sure we sell trees that grow here, number one, even though the fruit tree may say 500 hours or 200 hours. Those trees have already been tested, and they grow here. Now, some varieties do, some varieties don't.
Right.
And it's just variety dependent. So that's why we try to sell what works.
And what we're talking about here too is for homeowners, and so that it's not necessarily people that are in business, right?
Yeah,
so
not commercial crops.
So I do have a question too about commercial crops. I mean, just really quickly, what can we expect to see in the next few months, next year, as a result of this freeze that's unusual for our part of the world?
Onions are fixing to go up in price.
Yeah, okay. All kinds of onions.
Yeah, I just realized I was just looking online earlier. We had some media stuff come through about the Rio Grande Valley. A lot of the citrus industry has been they've been hurt big time. Yeah. And anytime there's a freeze in those large producing areas, it causes a problem in supply and demand. I mean, kind of like the freeze did. Milk and bread were kind of short order in most of the stores. So so the same thing's going to happen with the onions and those types of products, especially your fruit. So those trees are going to, not only they were affected this year, but it's going to affect this next year's crop. So, the good thing about onions, it's an annual. The bad thing is they were affected severely. So they lost crops in a sense. So it's going to impact the availability of some of those, those locally grown type produce.
Okay. So onions are a really good segue into
Hey.
other types of plants and how they've been affected. So our vegetable gardens is probably one of the
Vegetable
first
gardens.
things we think of.
Yes, I was out in it today. The one thing that did survive is strawberries.
Nice.
Yeah, we
Yay.
had strawberries. They survived. They do really well. And now when they, well, I do know that in the Panhandle they grow some strawberries up in that region, and they lost them because they're much further north and had some even harsher conditions. But we have a couple of beds where we already had them planted. They're out there. They're doing great. We actually did a planting video today to show people how to plant them and how to care for them a little bit, and showed the different methods, because typically people use strawberries an annual. There's a way to avoid that and to have plants for next year. You buy one plant, you may have 3 or 4. They send out little pups. And those, what you do is you take the mother plant out once they're done producing, and you leave the pups in, and you just kind of, you have to nurse them along and give them out the mouth occasionally. But once you get them through, the next year they'll be your major producing plants. They'll be your mother plants.
For strawberries.
For
specifically.
strawberries.
Okay.
Yeah, specifically. So they did plant some onions just recently, but most of your, like your brassicas, like your broccoli, it was decimated. Typically can survive frost, and most of our winters does work quite well, but this was a little too excessive for it. So it pretty much, their broccoli was toast. So in fact, a lot of the vegetables, herbs, rosemary, quite affected. And that's going to be a hard one, because we kind of have to see how it handles it.
Yeah. Because rosemary is kind of shrubby.
Yeah,
right?
kind of shrubby. Yeah, it's an herb, but it's a shrub. And if it, since they're kind of evergreen, I mean, they're pretty much evergreen. If it had a lot of moisture content in there and those stems weren't big enough to really insulate it, then you might end up with some split wood and things like that. So you just have to kind of evaluate it as we move forward. Thyme did well. We had thyme out in the gardens. In fact, raised bed gardens, where I was walked by and I was like, "Oh, look, it's still present." So it definitely survived the time. So we pun. All right, yeah. So we kind of looked around and saw what survived. Well, now a lot of people are starting to think, let's start planting our gardens. We've had quite a few phone calls on that. Not only what do I do with the rest of the plants, but can I start planting yet? We typically don't really start planting our tomatoes and things like that for another week or two. But if you're able to protect them and insulate them, and you don't have, 5 miles of potatoes like some people do, you only have, 5 or 6 plants or something, and you can protect them, it would be okay to start planting them now. And that's as a transplant. Okay. So that's what we're doing right now. Like I said, we recorded a little video today on how to properly transplant tomatoes. There's actually 2 ways to do that. So we'll post that video eventually, as soon as I get it edited. New technology that I have to learn. Nice. So, but yeah, a lot of those vegetables are just gonna, your winter garden should be pulled up pretty much at this point anyway. We're starting to kind of get ready for the spring. We still have probably about another 2 to 3 weeks. If you can protect your plants well enough, then you can start planting those.
And just kind of go back to a basic. So a perennial is one that's going to come back every year, regardless of what you do to it. Yeah. But an annual is one that probably won't come back from year to year, because
it's a 1-year survival. It's basically you have to replant it every year. A lot of your little bedding plants and everything you can get at the store. But some of the petunias and stuff may last. It just depends. But there's some winter annuals that people plant. You'll see them all around a lot of the subdivisions and stuff. They go out and they plant them just to have seasonal color, which is fine. But that's an annual. That's something that once it gets too hot, they have to be ripped out and put something back else in. There's zinnias and everything that typically for the summertime, and all your bluebonnets. Bluebonnets also did well. So that was another one that survived it. So thank goodness. And that can also have some seeds require a dormancy or at least cold temperatures in order to germinate properly. So that's one of those things I kind of can't wait to see, because we always get those phone calls every year about how are the wildflowers going to do this year? Yeah. Well, I don't know. Let's find out, because this year's going to be different. It's something we haven't seen before.
And so with those perennials, are we following the same rule? Kind of wait about 4 weeks or so before you do anything with them?
Don't touch them yet. And that way, just in case we do have that freeze, they're protected. You won't lose as much of that plant. And also, just when you get to that point, we're just going to have to start inspecting them and seeing what they're going to do. So there's a lot of unknowns, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more too about. So we're going to get into more like what to expect. So you clean up what you need to clean up, and wait for what you need to wait for, and then how are we going to have a healthy garden in the spring and into next fall?
Right.
So we're going to talk a little bit about that, maybe touch a little bit on irrigation.
Yeah.
But we will be back after this when Michael's going to come up with like a top 10, top 5,
something like that. Top whatever.
Top. Your top.
I might think of more.
I want them all to start with peas. Can you make them start with? No, I'm just joking.
That's a challenge.
All right, but we're going to be back right after this. I'm saying peas because we talk about our people, our programs, our partnerships, and today we're talking about plants with Potter. But we will be back right after this with a few last tips.
Texas A&M Agrilife Extension Service is all about extending knowledge and providing solutions. We do that by using science-based information to create high-quality and relevant education for the people of Texas. More importantly, this outstanding education is delivered locally, right here in our county. We encourage lasting and effective change that helps our communities and our county thrive. We are Texas A&M Agrilife Extension, helping Texans make their lives better.
All right, and we are back. People, programs, partnerships, plants, all about so the freeze. So we've talked a lot about the freeze, what to do. So now, what are the things that we need to look for going forward?
Yeah. For going forward, we need to wait that 3 to 4 weeks, kind of see, let's get past a possible potential other freeze, not another polar vortex, but just another freeze that may damage those plants further. So what we need to do in 3 to 4 weeks, we need to start reevaluating those plants. Are they starting to grow back? If they're not, we may give them a couple of more weeks. So it's evaluating the time frame of which we need to, see if they're going to grow back or not. We also need to look for stems that are broken or cracked. There may have been ice and it may have cracked some branches or something like that. Trim those things up, get that dead material off of the plant. When you start to see the regrowth, go ahead and prune those plants. Get rid of all the dead stuff. Like we said, just gonna have to kind of put up with ugly for a little bit, but get to that point. Trim up those plants, let them start to regrow. And just keep in mind, looking forward, we're going to see some impacts. Things may not bloom like they should. In fact, a lot of the floral type plants, they may not bloom at all. We don't know what the impacts are going to be. So we just kind of have to keep that in mind and don't get too stressed out that, the azaleas won't bloom this year or something like that. Camellias, same way. They may not bloom next year in the winter as well, or they may be later or earlier. That's some of the things. Your trees, the buds will come out typically around the same time. They'll all start popping and budding. Well, some trees may be more affected and they may not come out at the same time. So we have to watch those type of events. So big production issues in a sense from a landscape perspective.
Okay.
Turf grass even.
Yeah.
Don't expect it to be green.
It's going to be brown for a while.
It's going to be brown for a while, and we're kind of waiting to see what the impacts. We had a discussion this last week about it. We're kind of waiting to see what the impacts are of the permafrost in a sense, especially with a warm season turf grass like St. Augustine. We don't know what the impacts are going to be on the root systems. So we don't know if we've lost root systems to the point where it looks dormant, but did we actually lose root systems that cause it to brown?
And how long will it take you to figure that out?
I think
like by midsummer, are you going to know? Or?
Well, no, I think we'll know probably by June.
Okay.
And kind of see what's going on. A lot of the turf grasses, because they're warm season turf grasses, they go dormant in our area. So a dormancy is a good thing because that it doesn't use fertilizer, it doesn't use water, and that's one of the things I express to viewers: do not fertilize anything at this point in time. We don't want to spur growth. We don't want to cause any more stress to plants right at this point in time. So don't do anything to stress them out. Leave it alone. Let's see what's going to happen. Typically I always say after April 1st is when we can fertilize, or when turf is actively growing. And that goes for most of your plants, because once you put something down, plants will take it up. If I put a fertilizer down when it's not actively growing, then that fertilizer goes right past the root system and goes unused. So that's basically wasting money. So we don't want that to happen.
Okay. So also landscaping, some of us have irrigation systems.
Yeah.
And so, obviously we heard a lot about during the storm, pipes bursting and that kind of thing. So, but it may not be really obvious right away
now
on your irrigation system. So what kind of things are we going to look for there?
Yeah, one of the things is that if you have an irrigation system, you have what they call backflow preventer that keeps the water from backing up into your home. Those are typically made of brass, and they have ball cock valves that are on the sides. And what you'll have to do is once we kind of warm up and before we ever turn those on, and hopefully they winterize them properly. If they haven't, then sometimes the little bell housing up top will actually pop off because of the freeze. Sometimes they'll actually split. The actual brass will split wide open. So you have to look at those types of things in order to kind of see what's going to happen with it. So just inspect them, slowly turn on the water. Don't just go blasting it all at once. And especially from a standpoint that, when you get to the point of operating that system, briefly turn on each of the stations and inspect those areas, because there might be heads that still had water in them, and believe it or not, frozen, when water freezes, it has a lot of pressure. I mean, my dad told me a story of where one of his aunts had sinks that were in the wall with galvanized pipe, threaded galvanized pipe. He said that it froze so bad that the actual whole faucet ended up in the sink. It stripped all the threads off a galvanized pipe, which is amazing, but that's a lot of pressure. Right. We only have PVC for our irrigation system. So there's going to be a lot of parts possibly that had water in it that expanded. The solenoids where it actually turns on certain stations may be impacted, anything like that. So we'll just have to kind of wait and see. Probably going to be some repairs.
So yeah, be prepared for those.
Be prepared for repairs. So.
All right. So what we've talked about so far is, this time of year, so what to do and things to think about like after a freeze. And when we have other conversations, other times of the year, we may be talking about different things. So now we want to know, what are the top tips for this time of year? So
we're going to try with peas.
All right. You're going to try? Okay. I challenged him during
Please.
the Yes. We can just start them all with please.
There you go.
Peas and please.
There you go.
Okay.
That's right.
Please.
So please don't do anything for 3 to 4 weeks unless it is a mushy, water-soaked plant. That's the only time that you want to trim. Okay. Please do not fertilize anything at this point in time. It's not necessary. 3, plants will require soil temperatures in order to germinate and also to regrow. So that's going to take a while. So just wait. And once those temperatures come up, then the plants will start to grow. So just be patient and use that as a identification mark to say, okay, now I can start doing things. That's 3. Okay.
And you did really well with the peas. Yeah.
So let's see. Anything else? Inspect your irrigation systems before ever turning them on. Water wasted. I understand a lot of people ran water during the freeze trying to keep pipes from freezing and things like that. But, water is a precious resource. We need to prevent irrigation leaks. The only way to do that is inspect your systems. See, I can kind of come up with them in reverse, too.
It works. And then patience, I think, is the biggest one that I've heard.
Exactly what my last one was going to be.
Okay, sorry, didn't mean to take away your thunder.
No, it's good. Patience is one of those things we just have to exhibit at this time. We've got some ugly out there. We just need to deal with it for a couple more weeks and just kind of make it through it, and then we can evaluate. And some people will be saying, I might have to just go ahead and replace plants, and that's okay. That's Mother Nature. That's kind of the cycle of life in a sense. So we'll just have to evaluate things here in a couple of months, like in about a month, and see what's going on.
So right now, where we're at is near the end of February, and so you're mentioning April 1st for our area in particular. So it could be different in other parts of Texas, other parts of the nation, but around here, April 1st is kind of when you're going to really start taking action.
That's a drop dead date.
Okay. And then that's a good time to also, call the extension office, call one of the master gardeners, look at some of that stuff online that's available. Go back and listen to some of our other shows about gardening to get ready for those kinds of things. Because this is the Extension Hour. We talk about our people, our program, our partnerships, and our plants. Yes. And it's been a really great show. Thank you so much for sharing all this great information with us, Michael. And we'll be back next week with more of the Extension Hour right here on Lone Star Radio, 104.5, 106.1, and worldwide, irlonestar.com. We're available on YouTube, YouTube, podcast places, all those kinds of things. And we'll see you next time.